Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection for UFC Oklahoma City with me, Zane Simon, and my timely today and unbathroom encumbered co-host, Connor Rebish.
The trick is to start your bathroom nap a little earlier, right?
Yeah.
I let it play out to completion, but I actually went there at breakfast time this morning, so got back with plenty of time to spare.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know the waitresses appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Then I get in frantic phone calls from me like, I don't care. Just shock him. You have a cattle prod. Just
break the goddamn door down. Do whatever you have to. He needs to do this show.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So we're more or less running on time today. I'm Miracle. And we're going to try to burn through this Oklahoma City card because I have other shit to do, frankly, for once.
And let's be honest, it even more so than some of the other cards down the lineup. This one is probably not worth a ton of time talking about it.
Yeah, we won't be remiss from skipping through some of this stuff. So let's just jump right into the first bout, a light heavyweight bout between Josh Stansbury and Jeremy Kimball. Connor, quick thought.
I'm happy to see Jeremy Kimball still fighting. I wish he was still a middleweight. I think that's probably the best division for him. He's got a little bit of a spare tire as a light heavyweight, though. I mean, he's also packed on some muscle in recent years. But if you look at him a few years ago when he was fighting at 185, he was long, lean. He looked really fit for that division. And I think that's going to be a problem for him overall here at light heavyweight because Kimball is a solid striker, kind of reminds you of like a Matt Mitrione, pretty good movement, pretty good accuracy, respectable power, throws combinations, moves a lot, but he gets taken down and controlled by people. And in a division where he is now kind of, a little bit of extra chub aside, smaller and weaker than most of his opponents, that's going to be a problem. The question is whether Josh Stansbury will actually pursue the ground game. I have to imagine he will after his last fight when he just sort of patiently got outstruck by Devin Clark. I have to imagine that this guy with several submission wins is going to start looking for the ground game more. If he doesn't, then Kimball will absolutely have a chance to outstrike him with a lot of volume and accuracy. But I expect that at some point, big, strong Stansbury is going to drag him down and submit him. So I'm going with Josh Stansbury by, hold on, got to check my consistency. By third round, hold on. Second round submission is what I said.
I'm actually going to take Kimball here. I think Stansbury, other than like a lot of his UFC ability, I think is really just kind of dependent on his durability and being durable enough to basically survive and outwork somebody who gets tired first. Unfortunately, like he can wrestle and grapple a lot, and he does have submission wins, but his wrestling and grappling are very one note. Like he's not any kind of amazing wrestler or any kind of amazing grappler. It's just, regionally he could hit some takedowns, and as fights dragged on, he could get submissions and, get on tired dudes or jump on a back, jump on a neck, something like that, pick something up in the moment. He's got a lot of guillotine chokes, a lot of like him getting taken down and getting a choke in the moment kind of thing. And I don't think that a lot of faith in him implementing that in a fight. And
that's fair.
So in the UFC, and I think Kimball's just going to be lighter and quicker and able to sort of outpoint him and stay away from him and piece him up standing, have a better gas tank than him, and just kind of dance around and stay away. Stansbury doesn't have the dynamic ability that what's his name, DeLima had, and even DeLima didn't knock Kimball all the way out. So
yeah, Kimball is definitely very, very tough.
Yeah, so I'm picking Stansbury, or I'm picking Kimball to pick up that decision. Odds on this fight: Kimball is the underdog coming in, opening at -120, jumping immediately to +150, where he has stayed. No movement on that line at all. And Stansbury opening at -120 as well, and dropping immediately to -183, where he has stayed.
I would say the lines have to be a little longer for a bet on Kimball, and otherwise I would just avoid it.
Yeah. It's a fight between two bottom rung light heavyweights where really anything could happen.
Yep.
That brings us to our second bout on the card, a lightweight fight between Tony Martin and Johnny Case. And I really like this fight a lot. It's a battle between two diversely skilled and still and diversely limited lightweights. Like, Case is probably just not the best athlete in the world when it comes to power and dynamic ability. He's a slick striker in spots, but without any power to his game at all. And he can be a good wrestler, and he can be a good grappler, but he can also be out wrestled and out grappled by people who can really go after him. And Tony Martin, on the other hand, is big and dynamic and an incredibly awkward striker and a very good power wrestle grappler. So the question really is just, can Tony Martin get takedowns while getting pieced up striking? And I don't know. That's a tough one. I think he can. I think he can wear on Case and use his size to get that done. But, you know, the other thing is that Tony Martin has had a tendency to fade badly or to be really inconsistent round to round when he doesn't fade. Like, he came back, I think, in the third round of his fight with Jan Cabral to win that third round, but that was after, like, totally falling apart in the early rounds.
Talking about Case?
No, I'm talking about oh wait, no, I'm not talking about Case. Sorry, wrong guy. I'm talking about Martin and not Jan Cabral, but
you're thinking about Felipe Oliveri. Yeah,
Felipe Oliveri. Totally clicked the wrong button and then misremembered everything after that. So ignore me.
No,
But
you're fine. I knew what you were saying.
Yeah, he can fade badly, and that Alex White fight, like, he took a lot of hard shots before being able to find these takedowns on White, who's really not a very good wrestler at all. So probably if I'm assuming Johnny Case doesn't get submitted, I think I have to pick him to beat Tony Martin.
Sure. Yeah, Phil McKenzie said something to me not long ago that is I've kind of kept in my mind, which is that journeymen or like non-superbly athletic fighters, those are the ones that we look at that give us a really good idea of what the true limitations of a style are. Because somebody with, like, Johnny Case is very much kind of a new breed striker, transitional submission grappler. You know, like, he's like TJ Dillashaw without being a really, like, top-class athlete. Yeah. And so you get to see where Dillashaw might be able to, with stamina or pace or power, overcome certain obstacles. Case is going to struggle with those. And I think that is going to be the problem for him here against Tony Martin. I think Martin's size cannot be overlooked. These guys are listed at being the same height. I don't know if that's true. Martin looks more like 6 foot than 5'10" to me. B, I know that Tony Martin, in terms of frame, is just a massive lightweight. He's a huge guy. And that's, I think, been the reason why he has faded late. But on that note, his recent performances have been pretty encouraging to me. We had a comeback third-round submission over Felipe Oliveri. Not a fight he was doing terribly, and he actually started coming back in the second round. And he said, I think that was like his favorite performance because he got to fight through adversity. He got to show what he was made of. And then he got a convincing 3-round decision over Alex White. And those are the kind of fights, like, I think Alex White might have tired him down, taken his wrestling away, and beaten him up in the third round 2 years ago. And I think the adoption of early weigh-ins and the fact that Martin's now been working with perfecting athletes who also run Joanny and Jacek's diet and weight cuts, which have been markedly easier for her in the last 2 or 3 fights she's had, that seems to have made a serious impact on the game of Martin. And a Tony Martin who is slowly but surely getting better with his striking and who is a big, strong, very able submission grappler, him being able to go through rounds consistently is a big strength. And I think he's probably capable of soaking up whatever Case throws at him because Case isn't particularly powerful. No, so I think that Martin will have to go through a little bit of fire here, but I think Case's willingness to scramble and grapple when he gets tied up against such a big opponent who is genuinely a very skilled ground artist is going to be his undoing. So I actually like Tony Martin by a 3rd round submission.
Yeah, I think my feeling is just that Case's wrestling is just a little too big a step above Alex White that he can actually still tire Martin out in those scrambles.
Yeah, that is certainly possible. I think we have a little bit, though, overlooked Tony Martin as a developing fighter. Like he's
I was really high on Tony Martin coming in. I think the other part for me was just that how I know Alex White's boxing has come along a long way, but Tony Martin still lost a lot striking in that fight, and the combination of his past cardio problems and his inability to make striking just totally click for him has me hesitant on him.
But it was the fact that he came back and started hurting Felipe Olivieri on the feet. I think that really raised my eyebrows and made me think like, oh, you know, Tony Martin had a few Ryan Bader moments that made it seem like he might be a bust, but he has actually continued to work on his game and turned in some good performances. So he's not to be at 27 years old, you know, he's not to be written off yet. That's for sure.
Oh no, I'm not writing him off. I
know that. I'm not accusing you of that. I'm just saying overall, I think I kind of forgot about him as an analyst as well, and he's better than I thought.
He is the favorite right now, opening at -130. Few spikes as the odds adjusted, and now has leveled off in the -150 range. Now -142. Case. He opened at -110, jumped around a little as well, went up to +125, and is now +116. All right, that brings us to a featherweight bout: Jared Gordon versus Michael Quinones. And Connor would start this, but fair to say we've already broken down this fight, and it got lost on the scales. So go ahead, you're back in time before I got my pick in. We've already broken this down, so don't go too far into it.
We've done this one before. I think last time we expected the dynamic counter-striking of Quinones to get him some moments early, but for ultimately the really consistent and aggressive wrestle boxing of Jared Gordon to notch the win. So I'm once again picking Jared Gordon by unanimous decision.
Yep, same. I think Gordon, he's a really aggressive, stereotypical almost wrestle boxer, kind of wild man fighter, and I think just having that power wrestling game is enough to get by Quinones, who seems like he could develop to be a really top flight fighter, but it'll be a development curve.
Yeah, I agree.
Quinones is the underdog, opening at +100, dropping to -120, and sort of rising up slowly to be back at +114. And Gordon opening at -140, jumping up to -112, and dropping back down to be -140 again.
Fine with it.
Yeah.
UFC debutants, no problem.
Yep, this should be close. They're both good athletes. They have different styles. It'll really be about who can implement the basis of their game better, and no reason to think either guy couldn't win the fight. Potentially, Quinones could certainly get a one-punch knockout or something. He's got that kind of powerful dynamicism to him.
Agreed.
That brings us to a lightweight bout: Devin Powell versus Daryl Horcher. This should be, to me, this is probably a wash for Horcher if he's anything like the guy that showed up to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's kind of surprising. Like, you look at him, you see him, he looks like this just sort of pasty Midwestern dude who would be just sort of uninspiring altogether. But he's actually a really sharp, powerful counterpuncher who has good speed, really good hand speed and accuracy. He's not a great volume striker, but when he hits clean and he hits hard, and he's very good at it. His game is not otherwise very diverse, but it's focused enough that, especially against bottom level competition, he's going to do really well.
Yeah. If your name is not Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's generally pretty good at keeping the fight where he's best.
Yeah. Powell is a kind of unathletic wild man. He fights at his best when he's getting pieced up and has a chance to swing wild in return.
Yeah.
but his defense is terrible when he's getting pieced up. And so it's sort of this off chance that he'll be able to connect with something huge while fading away with his head turned and just like swiping at something. And he's made it work. Like, he's wild. He will gut through things when he looks like he's on the verge of falling apart. But against good athletes, they like his fight against Drakkar Klose, a good athlete with a patient game plan is just going to tear him up to pieces.
Yeah. If Bryan Barberena wasn't so big or so good, he would look a lot like Devin Powell. He's hittable, extremely hittable, but is very tough. Even though he looks terrible when he gets hit, he gets like flung off balance. So every hit looks like a potentially fight-ending blow. Nonetheless, he takes them surprisingly well. And yeah, you're absolutely right. When somebody get like the most surprising aspects of Bryan Barberena's game, the things that allow him to get really shocking upsets, those are the things that are the very basis of Devin Powell's game. Like, for example, when Drakkar Klose was just beating his pants off, then Powell up against the fence, got pushed against the fence, and landed 2 withering elbows to the chin on Drakkar Klose. Those little moments, he will find something. He's scrappy, basically. That is his whole thing, is he is scrappy. But you don't want to be scrappy against somebody who has the sort of technical control of Daryl Horcher. I'm hoping that Horcher, I don't know if he got injured in the Nurmagomedov fight or whatever, but it's been complete inactivity from him since then. I think that was in 2015, late 2015.
Like he may have picked up a knee injury off that fight.
Yeah, so we may be looking at a diminished Daryl Horcher. We may also be looking at a slightly rusty Daryl Horcher with such a long layoff. But provided those things aren't too much of an issue, and I don't think they will be, because I think Powell's going to let Horcher get into his rhythm before he manages to do anything himself. Like, I think Horcher is going to be he'll give Horcher the time he needs to get going, because only then is Devin Powell effective.
Yeah.
So I think that Daryl Horcher is probably going to have a slow start and then win a pretty comfortable unanimous decision with his striking. Possibly a TKO.
Odds on this, Horcher is a decided favorite, opening at -260, now to -376. And Powell, a reasonable underdog, opening at +180, now up to +295. So that makes sense to me, honestly, with the way Powell fights and how underwhelming he is athletically. Getting wins in the UFC is going to be an uphill battle for him. All right. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout: Carla Esparza versus Maryna Moroz.
We had occasion last week to talk about Boetsch Correia not getting the amount of respect she deserves. Carla Esparza is absolutely in the same position, except that she deserves that respect even more than Boetsch Correia, like substantially more. I guess she had a bad attitude on The Ultimate Fighter. I didn't really watch that season, so I didn't have any.
She got caught up in the like cliquey sort of. I mean, literally nobody came out of The Ultimate Fighter. Well, the person who came out of that Ultimate Fighter season the best was Paige Van Zandt, because she wasn't on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about it.
Like, the best thing that could be said for anybody was that, like, Joanne Calderwood and Tisha Torres were forgettable. Like, nobody remembered them on the show. Likeable.
Like, yeah, Joanne Calder was just like sweet and had a small voice, so it was like, oh, I like her. But anyone who did anything, she was liked for that before, but during the show, nobody even talked about it. Nobody was like, oh, that Joanne Calderwood's so sweet. Anything. They were forgotten for all the cliquey bullshit, and that's the only thing anyone took away from that, was hating everybody. Right, and it's not fair to define Carla Esparza as a fighter, at least, by that behavior. She's a very established, very respectable top women's strawweight. There's a reason that she beat Rose Namajunas so convincingly to take the strawweight title when it was first created. And the fact that she got blown out by Joanna Jędrzejczyk, like, yeah, she's limited. She's stylistically limited. There's a few things she does well, and it's not like at this point she's the only woman that Joanna Jędrzejczyk has just beasted on. So there's not really any shame in that. She has been looking all right. She had a few issues, I think, Esparza, shortly after that Jędrzejczyk fight. It took her a while to come back, and then against Juliana Lima, I I think she got really excited. She's like, okay, I want to fight again. She took that fight on short notice. Like, looked a little like she didn't have the confidence in her takedown attempts. Like, it was more like the way she looked in the first 3 minutes against Rose Namajunas before she adjusted, but for longer portions of the fight. And that is a problem for Esparza. I think she kind of has like that Wilson Hayes thing that I talk about so much, where she really needs her takedowns to work before she gets comfortable with her striking. And without her striking, it's harder to set up the takedowns. So you always get some awkward exchanges from Esparza in the early going. But I don't think that'll be too much of a problem here. You know, I think Morose is definitely a dangerous boxer when she wants to be, but she's also pretty inconsistent. And I think that Esparza just having the focus on what she wants to do at every moment is going to be a big thing for her in this fight. And I also thought Esparza, by the way, had a good case for winning the fight she had with Ronda Marcos. It was very close. And I thought neither woman came out of that bout looking bad. I think that it looked like Esparza has not only kind of gotten back into her stride, but has even started to improve her striking a little bit. She started to round out her game some more. I think that her wrestling and submission grappling are going to be enough to overcome the inconsistent power boxing of Morose.
Yeah, my worry for Esparza is honestly that I think Joanna Jędrzejczyk may have fractured a reasonable game into something that is striving to be more technical and is worse put together. That would be my worry with Carla Esparza.
Can you explain?
That, that like after taking that complete beating from Joanna, she has gone out and been like, I need to get better at striking, a lot better at striking. And she's working on it a lot. And it doesn't, now her striking may be a little better, a little busier, a little more, a little more technical, but it may also be less tied to her wrestling than it was before. And like in the Marcos fight, it seemed like at some points she just kind of had trouble figuring out what it was she actually wanted to do.
She showed some really nice striking, but there were periods where it's like, why are you doing all this striking? But then again, Marcos was also surprisingly competitive on the ground. So maybe that had something to do with it.
And that's kind of what I mean. Is it's just like, I feel like classically she was much more a fighter that who went out with a set plan of how to beat somebody and went after them. And it was very clear. And I think after that fight and the way she lost it, it's now like she may be a more technical fighter than before, but she has less of a plan.
That is a fair point. That makes sense.
And the big reason that I don't think that will matter against Morose is that I think there's still too much of Morose's game is built around her own grappling and wrestling still, and her wrestling and grappling are not well built. They are poorly defined elements of her game where, a lot of her grappling rising up was all based off of submissions off her back and throwing up arm bars. And she's got a tricky armbar game, but that is not the way to consistent success. And other than hooking one up on Joanne Calderwood in her debut, she hasn't had another submission.
Yeah, she's kind of like a Brian Ortega type, but without the depth to her sprint grappling game and without the consistency of aggression on the feet.
Yeah, and her boxing is really good in fits, but man, I mean, she can also have a fight against somebody like Danielle Taylor where she literally wins because she landed 2 more strikes per round while both of them spent most of the fight punching air.
Yep.
So I think in general, she might land a few good shots on Esparza, but Esparza should be able to land and do enough work getting inside to get her wrestling game going. And I think that will be something that Morose will be actually willing to give her. And then Esparza will do better there. Like Morose is not as good a grappler, wrestler as Randa Marcos. And while Marcos was very competitive on the ground with Esparza was also able to really push through, against a much larger opponent in Marcos and get a lot done. And I think Morose she's larger, but she's weaker than Randa Marcos. So
definitely the athleticism. I think that has also been a hurdle for some of Esparza's fights. And I don't think Rose has power and she's got a frame on her, but I don't think she's much of a powerful athlete.
No, she seems very pushable when it comes
she's
to
willowy. She's willowy on the feet, you know.
Her fight with Valerie Letourneau was a lot of like Letourneau being able to bully her physically and things like that. And,
although it is odd that we saw Letourneau doing that, now we're expecting tiny little Carla Esparza to do the same. But it is a matter of style matchup, not just size.
Yeah, I mean, Letourneau did it with her power, with her striking. I think Esparza can do it with her wrestling, just a more powerful wrestling game.
Sure.
Odds on that fight: Esparza coming in at -230 and dropping down to -266. Moroz coming in at +170 and going up to +215. I'm going to say those odds are wide just because Carla Esparza, like, I do not have a lot of faith in how she's approaching fights right now. And I especially feel like she's the kind of fighter right now who any win or loss she takes is going to be a close decision. And there's certainly a good chance that Moroz could just, find powerful counters standing to really drive Esparza off of her game and make this fight really difficult on Esparza.
Yeah, there's something to be said that for the idea that perhaps Esparza has lost. Like, if you're talking about her maybe losing her focused game, that maybe she's not as aggressive in the top as she used to be. Like, if you compare what she did in top position against Rose Namajunas versus what she did against Marcos or Lima, like, she went full Frankie Edgar, full late career on Namajunas, and more like Gleison Tebow against Juliana Lima,
Yeah. So I wouldn't have that much faith in where Carla Esparza's at right now. That you can make an argument that she beat Randa Marcos, but it would be an argument. And Moroz is not like, she's not a big step down from Randa Marcos. Marcos has had a lot of trouble finding her own wins in the UFC.
Yep.
So
That's fair.
I do not think the odds should be as wide as they are. Carla Esparza hasn't shown that she's that kind of favorite these days. That brings us to a middleweight bout: Vitor Miranda versus Marvin Vettori.
They must have just added this shit to the card. I swear I didn't see this like 3 days ago.
It was added months ago, but it was not officially on the UFC website until like 2 days ago.
So just like bureaucratic trouble.
Yeah, they just forgot to add it a long time ago. So let's see, where are we? This is me. Okay. This is a weird fight. I am probably picking Vitor Miranda, but a lot of that is just based off how smart or unsmart Marvin Vettori can fight. Because Vettori is a powerful athlete who has a lot of parts to his game that are kind of there. Like, he's an okay striker in bursts. He's got power and accuracy and speed and dynamicism. Doesn't have a deep technical game, often kind of throws himself at opponents. He can wrestle and grapple. He's especially good in transition and in submissions, more than he is a wrestler. And Miranda is really just a power striker who wants range, and he's an all right takedown defender, not a great one, but it's all about fits and bursts of, like, it's all about him keeping the fight at range so that he can have these prolonged stretches of striking time against somebody. If he can shut down somebody like Clint Hester or Jake Collier, then that's all to his benefit. If his fight with Marcel Guimaraes was just what he wanted, but Chris Camozzi was able to also just kind of bully him. I think Miranda, I don't like enough of what Vettori does consistently enough for him to beat Miranda here. But if he's come out with like a really well-crafted game plan, Miranda's there to be beaten.
Didn't Kamosi kind of out wrestle Miranda through stretches of that fight as well?
He did a bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that worries me with Vettori.
Yeah, it's like I think that there are ways and paths for Vettori to win this fight. But even his fight against Alberto Uda, his first UFC bout, where he got on top of Uda and eventually got a submission, Uda took him down. And then Vettori reversed in the scramble, and Uda also loves playing guard, so he gave up guard. And that kind of thing, like, it just doesn't give me enough confidence in any part of Vettori's game to bank on him taking Miranda out of his for long stretches.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Vettori may only need a moment. He's probably not going to knock Miranda out because Miranda's never been knocked out. He's extremely tough.
Yeah.
But he could absolutely jump and get a guillotine or something. Miranda has been out-grappled and out-wrestled. He's made clear strides in his grappling game over recent years, to the point where he, got a lot of wins with his ground and pound on the ground, beating people up from top position, controlling them from half guard. It's not something that this, Brazilian kickboxer would have been doing back in 2013. But there are definitely moments where he's just sort of thinking on the ground, and it's not like natural to him yet. And Vettori has a natural knack for scrambles and transitions. He's also 23, so we could absolutely, and a great athlete, so we could really see some quick, startling changes in the game of Marvin Vettori. Sometimes I bank on those. In this case, I do think that the experience and the tendency of Vettori's to sort of exchange with people on the feet and play the striking game is going to be a problem for him here. If he's really focused, if his game is to hold Miranda down until he can get a submission, it's absolutely a winnable fight. But I'm not yet convinced that he's capable of fighting that kind of fight. So I think that Miranda will have to survive a few close scrambles, but will probably rack up like 2 rounds on the feet.
Yeah, I agree. Vettori, his striking, from when he gets into a striking match, he's way too willing to try and be like crafty on the outside and just sit and like wait for opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Miranda wants. That's like his best possible outcome.
Yeah, it's weird that like Vettori's last 2 wins are almost more worrying than his most recent loss, because the most recent loss, we saw how good he can be on the ground. He had a pretty competitive grappling match with Shoeface, with a really good submission artist and Antonio Carlos Jr., and he held his own at stretches of that fight. But then on the feet against arguably worse fighters in Igor Araujo and Alberto Uda, we see these weird moments, these kind of lapses in his game where you can just see it's not fully put together yet.
Yeah. That said, he is a massive favorite here. Opening at -210 and dropping all the way down to -352. And Vitor Miranda opening at +160 and going up to +281.
That is very surprising. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked that he was a favorite, but I mean, I guess it's been a while since Miranda fought last.
Yeah, he fought in May of 2016, so
it's been a little over a year.
Over a year, and he's 38. So there's that.
But, I mean, I get it, but I don't get the how wide the odds are. I get him being an underdog. The stylistic matchup could be bad for Miranda, but with his experience, his ability, his striking ability, his power, it's
like
I don't understand.
It feels a lot to me like the Clint Hester fight, except with Vettori being less durable, or no, more durable, but less technical standing. I mean, he's a better grappler, but there's still a much better grappler, but the wrestling game is the same. Like there's not enough wrestling game for me to pick Marvin Vettori to take over,
Yeah, I mean, Hester is a special case of being totally uncomfortable on the ground. Like Miranda, like, it's maybe not a good sign that Vitor Miranda, even though I've praised the improvements in his grappling, it's still probably not a good sign that he just beats the shit out of you when you're on your back. He's not that good of a grappler.
No.
So I would say that Vettori definitely has a better shot than that because of his grappling ability. But
yeah,
it shouldn't be that wide, I don't think.
I just don't see the chain from his stand up to his grappling. That doesn't exist. It's on his opponents to initiate grappling exchanges, and Miranda's not going to do that.
Maybe, maybe he will. Crafty veteran Miranda might actually look to grapple with Vettori. Although I would hope that he would not.
Yeah, if he does, then the odds make all the sense in the world. And what do I know? But it just seems like a range kickboxing match against a guy who used to be a pro kickboxer and a guy who is best when he's on the ground.
Yep.
That brings us to a lightweight bout: Clay Guida versus Erik Koch.
This is me, right?
Yeah, this is you. Go after it.
I got a little sad reviewing tape for this fight because I kind of was reminded that Erik Koch really probably could have been something. He still could turn into a decent sort of middling contender. Who knows? He could exceed expectations and really get there. But he had a bunch of injuries, a few results that didn't go his way. I think he made that move to lightweight probably a little too late in his career. But all throughout, we have seen flashes of real brilliance from Erik Koch. He's a long, tall fighter. He used to be kind of a stiff, slow plotter a bit who would like knock you off with precision strikes. But he moves a lot more. He's light on his feet, uses his kicks and his jab, maintains distance a little more comfortably. I think the move to lightweight actually helped with that. If you compare his attitude, for example, in the fight with Dustin Poirier to his attitude in the fight with Shane Campbell, you can just see it's night and day, how much more active and how much more relaxed Erik Koch looks without that massive weight cut. And he's got power. Erik Koch, he's definitely a jump on your neck after he knocks you down kind of finisher. So you won't see a ton of knockouts in his record, but he hits hard. He had Dustin Poirier in all kinds of trouble in their fight. He had him knocked down, I think, twice early in that fight and really gave him a toe-to-toe battle. And, then comes back and sort of beats Shane Campbell to bits. I think we may still see something out of Erik Koch if he can keep his body in order. I think a fight with an older, more shop-worn Clay Guida is a really good test for him at this point. Guida returning to lightweight after going, I think, 3-1, 1-3 rather, at featherweight. Had some moments where it looked like he'd revitalized himself, and then had some moments where it looked like maybe he just can't take the shots the same way he used to. That being
2-4 at featherweight, but yeah.
2-4, sorry. But, that being said, Guida also did look quite good in his fight with Brian Ortega. I think he was winning that fight up to the point that he was knocked out, though it was certainly close. So it's tough to say. Basically, if Guida comes in here and he's really committed to his wrestling game, then he has an opportunity. If Koch can maintain distance, use his footwork, land shots on the way in, and deny the range for wrestling, which he's pretty good at. I think his takedown defense is like 80% or something like that. It's not bad. Then, that's an opportunity for Koch. I'm going to take the youth, the power, the speed, the timing of Koch over Guida, who I think is losing all of those things just by shades at this point near the end of his career. So I'm taking Koch. I will take him by third round submission.
Yeah, I think the big thing to me for Guida is that in every one of his last 4 losses since 2013 on, Clay Guida has been stopped.
Yeah.
He's been knocked out twice and he's been submitted twice.
Those knockouts, by the way, the first 2 of his entire career.
Yeah.
The submissions, like getting caught in an instant submission when shooting a takedown, that's something that has happened to Guida consistently at stages throughout, but getting knocked out and getting submitted so easily by some of these people it's not what you would have expected from a prime Clay.
Yeah. I mean, and it just, his submission defense problems are still there. And the thing is that Guida's never been any kind of finisher.
Yeah.
He's had a few submissions over his career, but you got to remember too that I think he talked about getting his arm triangle win over Shannon Googherty. and just being like, I didn't even train that. It was just there, and like I'd done it a couple of times or something. And it
how as a top position wrestler do you not train arm triangles ever?
he just, I think his grappling was never like, I'm sure he had actually, but it's just like he never, he was never the kind of guy who would go for a bunch of submissions while winning a fight.
Yeah.
It was always an afterthought. It was like, I can wrestle and bang my head, and so that is more fun than trying to finish the bout. And that's also meant that as Clay Guida fades, his opportunities to win fights go down pretty dramatically, because he's not stopping people, and he's more stoppable than ever.
Yeah.
And so as long as Koch's body is there, it's hard to see Guida winning this. Like, he might take Koch down and have some success for a round, but if he doesn't take him down in the next round, he's going to get pieced up. I mean, like...
Yeah, and shit, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Erik Koch submitted him from his back. Like, it could happen. Koch, I mean, maybe a little easier, I guess, because Guida's got an old school game, and Koch's game is pretty old school, too. It's like Muay Thai and submission wrestling.
Rufus Sport bottom game, which is actually a really good bottom grappling game.
Yeah, I mean, it's old school in the sense that, like, oh, I can throw my kicks because if you take me down, I'll play guard. That doesn't work all the time nowadays, but the Rufus Sport guys, I think, really did more than most to perfect that style of fighting and have produced a lot of guys who do that really well. Guida's been submitted a few times. Koch has a lot of submissions to his name. I think, like, the best case scenario for Clay is probably that this turns into like a repeat of the Hatsuhioki fight. And a lot of people thought Clay lost that fight, even from top position.
Yep. So I really, this makes me a little sad, because I think it could just be Guida getting, I mean, if he gets submitted, that would be like, if it turns into a submission battle, that would be best for Guida, win or lose. If it's a repeat of the Brian Ortega fight with somebody who has a lot more speed and power and actual ability to strike than Brian Ortega, then that's a big problem for Clay Guida.
Yep.
Odds on this fight, Guida coming in at plus 185, dropped down to plus 153, and now up to plus 261. So those odds have slowly been drifting high for him. And Koch opening at minus 265, little adjustment, and dropping down to minus 332. My only reason to think those might be a bit odd would be just Koch's injury history. Yeah. And this is his first fight since 2016, and his 2016 fight was his first fight since 2014. And he's had concussion symptoms. He's had all sorts of random injuries over his career. It is always an open question with him. Otherwise, I think that the odds are right where they should be.
Yeah, he's had 2 years in the past 5 years where he didn't compete once. Yep. He's fought 5 times in the past 6 years.
See, Koch inside the distance is plus 156. So, I don't know.
It's an option. Yeah, I'm still a little worried about banking on someone to finish Clay Guida, but it's getting easier.
In every loss recently.
Yeah, it's getting easier and easier to overlook that what used to be like a little granule of learned wisdom that Clay Guida is hard to finish. That's no longer the case.
Yeah, because especially too, I think to Clay Guida's benefit, moving to alpha male has put a lot of confidence back in him that I think being at Jackson Wink kind of eroded. Unfortunately, just a stylistic thing,
Yeah. I'm not sure he's there anymore though. I think his last fight he wasn't at alpha male for that.
They talked about it in the Ortega fight. They said he's training at Team Alpha Male.
Okay, he still is. I know he was still traveling around, but I guess that is still his base of operations.
I think he's just there now.
Okay, cool.
And yeah,
I think it worked for him because like what's going to be the thing for Clay Guida at this point? Really knuckle down on that wrestling game. Where do you go to find a top-notch wrestling room with people your size? It's Team Alpha Male, man. That's the choice.
They've also put confidence back in his striking. Like in that Brian Ortega fight, Clay Guida looked, he was there. He was out striking Ortega for 2 rounds.
That's true. Very true.
And I think that that's the best thing for Guida, but it also means that he gives himself the most openings to be finished.
Yeah. But how else is he going to win,
Yeah, exactly.
The Jackson Wink thing, the run around the outside, it's not going to work for him anymore. He's losing the speed, he's losing the agility, and now when he gets caught, he gets hurt. So he may as well try to overwhelm you.
Yep. All right, that brings us to BJ Penn versus Dennis Siver. Man, I have to break this down, don't I?
The one we've all been waiting for.
Last time Dennis Siver fought was 2 years ago. He's 38. I still think he has more in the tank than BJ Penn right now. So I'm picking Dennis Siver. Basically, the last time Dennis Siver fought, he looked like Dennis Siver still.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I think the biggest problem for Dennis Siver is honestly that he's never changed at all. And so at this point, everybody kind of knows what he does and how he fights and what it looks like. But he's still, he was still very competitive with Tatsuya Kawajiri, landing sneaky shots on breaks, looking dynamic and looking muscle bound as usual. And BJ Penn, even in his Yair Rodriguez fight, like he still has the speed in his hands, but he otherwise just looks like a withered sort of husk of the fighter he used to be. And I got to pick Dennis Siver for that.
Yeah, I'm going to agree, but I'm going to disagree slightly with part of your analysis. I think that Dennis Siver has changed, and I think that's the key to his chances here against BJ Penn, is that Dennis Siver used to be, like, he's always had elements of what he does now. He's always been a guy who would take you down and take top position. He would snap away with quick kicks. He used to be really agile and dynamic and used to, I mean, his thing was the spinning back kick knockout when he first came into the UFC. And that is no longer Dennis Siver. He's no longer like this surprising, put you away with one precise kickboxer. He's banked more on his boxing, I think, which is pretty shallow, but takes less energy. It's easier to do. He's relied a lot more on his wrestling and grappling. Those have become really big elements of his game in these later years. And I think, you could look at Dennis Siver and say, oh, he's not as good as he once was. Like the kickboxing Dennis Siver was amazing. And there's fairness to that. But it's also that when you get to 35 years old or so, you have to make changes. You have to try to find things that work for what your body is going through. So you have to find more efficient techniques. You have to rely more on your quickest shots because the full power ones aren't as quick as they need to be anymore for you to escape. You need to control portions of bouts. You need to out-wrestle people who can be out-wrestled. You need to be a gamesman. And that is the thing that BJ Penn has never had, is that BJ Penn is still trying to be BJ Penn. I don't know what his attempt adaptation was in the Frankie Edgar rubber match, but that's the only thing we've seen out of BJ Penn in a long time that was really different, was him doing some totally unworkable tippy-toe Muay Thai stance in a fight with a wrestle boxer. And then he comes back against Yair Rodriguez, and he looked okay considering, but looked, like he was trying to be classic BJ Penn, sort of patient, counter-punching boxing game. And that's about it on the feet, and the grappling is obviously still going to be a thing that BJ can do well. He's always been a phenomenal submission artist, but hasn't submitted a ton of people in MMA lately, and has always been a guy who tends to need his opponents to take him down to work that game. And when he does, I think some of BJ's ground game's a little outmoded as well. Trying to play guard, really willing to play off of his back. That stuff I don't think would work that well against Siver. And if it has a chance to work, BJ's already down because it means that Siver has gotten him to the ground. Siver's already in control. So yeah, I think Siver is Penn definitely still has like an eye for openings. He landed a really good shot on Rodriguez in that fight, but he's way more fragile than he used to be. I don't think cutting to featherweight now at 38 years old is doing him any favors in that regard. He's I think having a harder time pulling the trigger than ever before. That's always been a problem, and I just think it's gotten harder and harder for BJ to pull the trigger on his opponents. And he's still a boxer.
Yep.
And I think Dennis Siver is just going to kind of touch him with kicks on the outside, maybe take him down a couple times, and we'll see a somewhat close but pretty convincing decision from Dennis Siver.
Couple points on that. You said BJ Penn hasn't submitted anyone that recently, like his last submission wasn't Kenny Florian in 2009.
2009.
I mean, it's been almost a decade since BJ Penn submitted anyone.
Yeah, that is, just it sort of strengthens my point. Like BJ, he has all these things. It's like the legend of BJ at this point has really outgrown. I mean, that happens to everyone. Everyone who has a big reputation, it outgrows them at the point when, you know, because the real man at some point is going to start breaking down and getting worse. But
second point, Dennis Siver, murder kickboxer, only ever knocked out 3 people in the UFC. Naoki Kotani, Paul Kelly, and Nate Moore.
Yeah.
I feel a little more like the legend of Dennis Siver was always more, like, I don't know that he's ever changed that much. I think that people just kind of, the legend preceded the fighter, and people stopped letting him get what he wanted, and so he's had to adapt to that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. But the point is, whether it's to age or to something else, the point is that Dennis Siver has sort of
he has enough elements to his game that he's always been willing to get that go to, that when he can't get one, he'll go to any of them of several others.
Yeah, and he has. I think it's maybe that just now in his older age, he's had to go to all the aspects of his game all the time in every fight. Like he hasn't really had fights where he's been able to get away with doing just one thing, and at times it's made him look unremarkable because he doesn't have a ton of depth to all of these areas. No. Like for example, he always slips the same way and throws the same counter left hook. That is an opening that someone like can capitalize on.
Yeah,
but Siver mixes things up, and that is the key to his success here.
Yeah, the thing I see that I like is that he throws a lot on breaks, and that gives him a big opportunity to catch Penn if they tie up and things get a little crazy. Siver's going to be the dude throwing 2 or 3 hooks as the clinch breaks. Let's see. BJ Penn is an underdog for this fight, opening at +140, jumping up to +180 range, now at +179. Siver opening at -180, dropping down to -240, and slowly climbing back to -221, which is all fine to me. Yeah, I wouldn't go way wider because they're both 38, and Siver does have some predictability in his game that Penn could take advantage of if he gets the opportunity. And Penn, so, you know, there's certainly a chance for Penn to knock him out or for something like that. But if we're talking round by round decision, I got to go with Siver. And frankly, too, like, you know, Penn, for all of the quality in his game, his knockouts are that knockout of Matt Hughes, and then his knockout of his doctor stoppage of Diego Sanchez, and the flying knee over Sean Shirk, which was also like an end of the round stoppage. And Penn's not, like, as a knockout artist, he's not a venomous one punch finisher. Never has been. Yeah,
it's weird. We live in this weirdly accelerated MMA history because we see, like, BJ Penn is like a Jack Johnson. Like if you're a boxing fan and you watch Jack Johnson now, you're like, you can respect what he does, but you can also clearly see like there's a lot of technical holes here that newer fighters would have capitalized on really quickly. Yeah. He's just not been exposed to all that. But you know, that was like 1908. Yeah. Because MMA exists in a world where boxing and wrestling and submission grappling are all already fully established things, all these sources to draw from, the evolution happened so quickly that somebody like BJ Penn, who was still putting in really good performances in 2011, you look at him now and his game just looks like Jack Johnson's. It just looks completely focusless. You know, it just looks so outdated.
It's true. I hate to say it because I love BJ, but oh well. All right.
Really a product of his time and place. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
there is no circumstance in the current world that will ever allow us to see BJ Penn at his best again.
No. That brings us to a welterweight bout. Tim Means versus Alex Garcia.
I'm cool with it. I like this fight. I think it should be interesting. Tim Means, disappointingly, got that loss to Alex Oliveira, who fought a really intelligent fight against him. Big, powerful guy, used his wrestling. Could be something Alex Garcia is capable of doing, but probably won't be. Garcia he's obviously a fighter with a ton of like physical potential. He hits really hard. He's tough. He's got a few nice techniques, but he is Firas Zahabi's Leonard Garcia. You know, like he just can't make this guy be the kind of fighter he wants him to be. To the point that, as we've brought up in the past, I think that maybe Garcia is the kind of guy who doesn't really gel with a guy like Firas. You know, who I have tons of respect for what Firas Zahabi does, and I think he's one of the most knowledgeable guys in the game. But as a really cerebral coach, it was better to, you know, have a coach who just kind of treats him like a troll who hits people hard, you know, who just like lets him go in there and just be a fighter. Because Garcia is always like, you see this battle between discipline and desire in every single fight.
Yeah.
Where you can see like he's trying to be technical and he just wants to bang with people. He just wants to go in there and just throw some bombs. I think that is going to be a death knell against Tim Means, who has, yes, struggled with guys who will out wrestle him. He's kind of willowy and tall, not super strong against that kind of game. But who, if you allow him to kickbox, if you allow him to decide when the clinches happen, even if you allow him to decide when the takedowns happen, his volume, his accuracy, his power. I don't think we've talked enough about how hard Tim Means hits because he does usually need a few shots to finish someone, but he puts those shots on with consistency, and they are not friendly. He has quite a few knockouts throughout his career. Garcia, I think, is just a little too hittable. I think we may see basically an accelerated version of his fight with Sean Strickland, where he has some moments, he lands some big shots, tries to wrestle, you know, tries to mix things up, but Means just ultimately overwhelms him with a hailstorm of punches and kicks, knees, and elbows.
Yeah, I think the big thing to me is that the way Means fights, Means he either patiently kind of outworks you and gives you opportunities to patiently outwork him if you won't go after him, or he baits you into a firefight where he usually is going to be the guy that is tougher and scrappier and comes out on top and does the real damage. That doesn't always work. If he meets somebody who's a real technical master in some place, or who can just be a little wilder than him, then, you know, he has a fight like his Oliveira fight. He has a fight like his Matt Brown fight, where it's like, okay, Tim Means, no, you cannot dive into the clinch against Matt Brown over and over and try to beat him there. That's just not going to work for you. Or with the Oliveira fight, it was just like Oliveira just knew how to be a little wilder, a little messier, to throw him around a little and to get a submission. But for most guys against Tim Means, if Means is switched, like if he's switched off, he'll have the fight like he had against Marcio Alexandre Jr., where he just kind of floats around and wins unconvincingly, but it's still a win. But especially, I think, against a guy like Oliveira, who wants to bang and who wants to go out and throw huge shots, Means is going to bait him into an ugly fight that Oliveira is going to leave massive openings for Means to go through.
Yeah, and the trick with Tim Means is, you know, he's the dirty bird. He likes to scrap, but he does pretty things in those ugly fights. Like, I think that is the edge, is that he's so much more technical on the feet than most fighters, that when he can draw them into a scrap, he can pick them apart.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is that Garcia, like even that fight he had against Mike Pyle, like Mike Pyle had moments where he drew Garcia into this ugly fight. And the thing is, the moment he did, Garcia became much more plodding and much slower after those bursts.
He has like 2 minutes of huge explosions all he has left, and he's got to wait like 2 minutes before he can generate another one.
Yeah, and Mike Powell, unfortunately, should never have been fighting in that fight and should not be fighting at all if people care about his safety. I mean, I'm not gonna tell the dude he's got better things to do if he doesn't want to stop fighting. But going into that, it was like, okay, Mike Powell is going to get killed in this fight, and he got killed. And that's not Tim Means. Like, Tim Means is not the dude that you just knock cold with a punch. And if Garcia can't do that, he's going to get frustrated by what Tim Means is doing, and he's going to open up and get a little wild, and then Tim Means is going to make him pay for it badly. So,
agreed across the board.
Tim Means is the favorite in this fight, opening at -260, dropping up down to adjusting up to -195, and dropping all the way back to -240. And Garcia is the underdog, opening at +180, adjusting down to +158, and rising all the way back up to +194. Is there anything? Let's see. Means inside the distance is -120. So even you're muted, dude.
I think that's a bet.
Means inside the distance at -120.
Honestly, I mean, Garcia's been finished in 2 of his 3 losses. He hasn't lost enough for us to really know how he loses, but I think we've seen him get tagged and hurt in enough fights, and we've seen how inconsistent he can be, that a finisher like Means, I mean, what is Means' finishing rate? He's, let's see, 26 wins, 22 of them by finish, 18 knockouts. I think that's not a terrible bet.
Yeah. There you go. Well, that brings us now to a light heavyweight bout: Joachim Christensen versus Dominick Reyes. And,
tough one to call.
Yeah. So this is a hard fight to call because there's really not a lot of film on Dominick Reyes other than instant head kick KOs. Like, that's really all we have. And so you either are betting on him being a phenom. He's 27. He's only had 5 fights or 6 fights starting in 2014, really starting at the end, early 2015, if we're being more precise. And
only started his amateur career in 2013 or 2012. So he was really green.
Yeah, and I don't even like to consider amateur.
Yeah,
as like,
it's usually a marker for like, when did this person get really serious about fighting? And
yeah.
The point is, not very long.
Not very long.
It could be a phenom because he's only just started.
Yeah, he's 6'4". He's got, all the size to be a light heavyweight, all this power. What the rest of his game looks like is a mystery. And that makes Joachim Christensen a really interesting first fight for him. Because Christensen is not a good athlete. He is not a pretty striker, but he is a powerful straight puncher who is trickier than you'd expect on his feet. And the biggest part of that is that he's practically impossible to knock out. And he's a capable wrestler and grappler. He's obviously not the level of wrestler and grappler that can compete with the Gadzimurat Antigulov of the world. And, he still got surprised by Enrique da Silva on the ground. He's just not a great athlete. That's going to be a big factor for him in any part of the fight. But if Dominick Reyes is going to go out and look for a 1-round finish or fall to pieces, then Christensen might be an intensely terrible matchup for him. He
doesn't quite have more fights than all of Reyes' previous opponents combined, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
He's got 19. I think the most experienced guy Reyes has fought by far had an 8-6 record, and everybody else was like less than 5 fights.
So it's just, you're really either banking on hype and you're banking on Reyes to be just to go on an instant roll, or you're you're assuming that he doesn't get the job done in round one and then loses an ugly decision. I don't know. I'm really split on this because I want to believe in the hype train, and I know that Christensen is not a great athlete. So there's a good chance for a great athlete with a powerful, accurate game to do work.
His nickname is the Devastator, Dominick Reyes. Oh my God. Get on the hype train, Zane. The Devastator is pulled into the station.
It's like somebody supersized Dominick Cruz with that nickname. No longer the Dominator. Now he's the Devastator.
It's like a 10-year-old saw Dominick Cruz's nickname and was like, what's way cooler? It's like he's the Dominator, but with spikes all over it.
Exactly. Shit, I don't know. Honestly, you know what? I'm going to pick Reyes to come in and look amazing. And how about this? He's going to hurt Christensen in round one and do just enough in round two to pick up an ugly-ass decision.
Okay.
That's going to be my pick, because otherwise I have this gut feeling that Christensen is going to weather the early storm and grind him out for a win.
I was worried for a minute. I thought we were going to dissent, which I always hate doing on this show because it means you get a chance to catch up to me. Like probably the one period in which I've actually been the better picker of the two of us. I need to hold on to this lead. But I agree with you. I think Reyes is going to get the win. It's tough. It's very difficult to call all the reasons you laid out. Christensen's so much more experienced. He's so very tough. I think what it's got to come down to, if you're making a pick, though, knowing as little as we do about Reyes, is just kind of making a judgment call about style matchup. And if we're talking about style matchup, then yes, Christensen could give Reyes problems because he's the first guy he's fought who is like his size. Christensen's only an inch shorter, and he's a big dude. He's also a very towering figure in the cage, but he doesn't fight usually like a very long guy. He likes to fight like a tall guy. He likes to get into the clinch. He likes to get into the pocket. He's got great uppercuts, knees, short punches, and straight punches are decent from range. But other than that, not a huge kicking game. Not very good at just sneaking in little shots from far away. And that is
to walk into the pocket. Like
right.
He really has to trod in. So I know he's going to get hit hard. Like there's no question he's going to get hit hard.
Yeah, and that is Reyes' whole thing. Is like this looks like a young guy. He's older than me, but he's young in the game, and somebody who saw Conor McGregor and was like, "That's what I want to do." So he goes into his fights, he swaggers, he's got his hands down sometimes, even though I'm sure his defensive acumen is not actually up to par to allow that kind of behavior. The swagger tends to have an effect on his opponents. He fights with confidence like nobody can beat him, and he sneaks in punches. He's very, very accurate. I think, much as with Conor McGregor, Reyes obviously has power, but there's something to be said about how much a role timing and precision play and how you will see a lot of his early fights where he goes in there with somebody, they stand in front of each other, he kind of shifts to his side, and then just pops them with a left hand. Right on the chin, not a ton of power, they go down. So when you have a lot of power and you're very precise and you pick your shots that accurately, you combine that with the fact that Reyes is comfortable pouring on the volume and often comes out like a house on fire, just tearing after his opponents. He's very much like a much less polished Conor McGregor, with perhaps an even more impressive frame for his division. But, we don't know. I think the big thing here is that I don't see Christensen close the distance without running into something, and I think he may settle for a more placid outside fight where I think Reyes' more long-range game will give him the advantage. And other than that, it is very difficult to know what wrinkles may appear in this fight, whether Reyes gasses out, whether he loses heart because he hasn't got the early finish, whether Christensen maybe kind of gets scared off. I don't think it'll happen, but it's possible that he goes into a really tentative fight and we get a kind of a slog here if he doesn't get knocked out. It's also possible that Reyes hands Christensen his first knockout loss.
Yeah.
It could be one of those moments. Christensen's 38 years old, been fighting for a long time, and he's taken a lot of shots, and Reyes is probably one of the more dangerous strikers he's faced. So Yeah, too many X factors to really have a solid prediction. I think both of us just got to go with our guts, and that's why I'm agreeing and picking with Dominick Reyes.
The biggest thing that pushed me towards Reyes, honestly, is Christensen needing 3 rounds to put Bojan Mihailovic away.
Yes, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Against the worst version of a UFC fighter, Christensen still had trouble actually dominating the fight.
Yeah, and that's the problem, I think, is that he's just not overpowering enough or assertive enough as a fighter to have a really good shot against a guy like Reyes.
Yeah.
Reyes, by the way, for people who don't know, he's the guy, you probably saw it on Twitter or any other place where MMA has taken over some part of social media. He was the guy in the last LFA event who had his opponent come up to him and evade a punch and say, no, no, no. And then Reyes immediately kicked him in the head and knocked him out and then went, yes, 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 as he was lying face down on the ground. So he's definitely has some star power. I would like to see him turn into something serious because he's a fun fighter to watch.
Yeah. All right. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout. Felice Herrig versus Justine Kish.
Tough fight to call here.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Reyes is opened at minus 275, has been falling or widening ever since, is now at minus 373. Christensen opening at plus 195, has been widening ever since, is now at plus 293. It's a little odd, or it was a little wide for my liking at light heavyweight with somebody as green as Reyes. But like I say, the Mihailovic fight just is kind of an exposing moment for me with Christensen, where it's just like, even against really poor, underprepared competition, he's not going to be that dominant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to surprise people, he needs to get into a fight. You know what I mean? Like when he did with Frank Waston with Dominick Reyes. Yeah, the odds are a little wide, but honestly, I'm not going to touch this one for betting.
All right. Herrig, Kish.
Kind of a tough fight to call given Felice Herrig's last performance. Probably the best of her career in terms of like all-round skill set. She's often been billed as a kickboxer, and she's shown flashes of that in previous fights, but has just been terribly inconsistent. And I think, you know, I've brought this up several times now. Every time we talk about her, she talked about having like real self-confidence issues and just kind of having an adrenaline dump before every fight. And you could see that. She had a lot of fights that were close because she just sort of lost her edge down the stretch. And that wasn't really the case against Grasso. Granted, in Grasso, Felice had an opponent who was weirdly tentative and just did not want to engage, but some of the credit for that has to go to Herrig's counterpunching. She scared Grasso off with some really nice shots in the early going, kept up enough of a pace to get the win, and even though it ended up being a fairly close fight, I don't think there was really any question that Felice Herrig had earned the victory. So that's a very credible win for a woman who has kind of floated around the middle of her division for a long time now. Whether she can repeat that feat against Justine Kish is another matter, because Kish is certainly more susceptible to certain things that Herrig does well than Alexa Grasso. She's certainly more hittable, and she puts herself in harm's way a lot more readily. So she's not going to be scared off by those early counters. But I think that's the problem for Herrig, is that Kish is not going to change her mind about what she wants to do. And unless Herrig can knock her out, which I don't see her doing, she's going to wind up in the clinch. She's going to wind up on the ends of just a very rugged Muay Thai style. Close the distance, land elbows, knees. Everything Kish does is just marching forward. She can be a little robotic. She's certainly hittable, but she is also a powerhouse. She's very strong. Her stamina has never been questionable, despite the fact that she fights at such a crazy pace. She seems to keep that pace up very well. So I think it's going to be a tough one for Felice, honestly. I think if maybe she was a better wrestler, she might have an opportunity to outwork Kish on the ground here, but she's never been a phenomenal takedown artist, and I don't think she's going to be able to keep Kish out of the pocket. So I think that she may win the first round, but it's going to kind of drag her back into her previous state of putting in too much effort early and kind of having an adrenaline dump as Kish just keeps plugging away. So I like Justine Kish by a fairly close but clear decision.
Yes, this is a little, I don't know. I dislike having to make the pick I'm going to make because Herrig is another fighter that I think has been unfairly maligned in her career. And
this is just the white knight hour. We just stick up for these women that women do see. They get these female fighters though. They get a lot of shit on social media. You know,
yeah, like
weird.
Herrig, you know, she has this presentation that's very like sexy, cute, and all that, and for a lot of people, it really undercut their ability to take her seriously as a reasonably good, solid veteran fighter who has a well-rounded game and is difficult to put away. I mean, like, I don't think Herrig has ever been. She's never been finished in any fight, and since her early losses, you know, Paige Van Zant is the worst loss on Felice Herrig's career. Otherwise, it's Tecia Torres, Carla Esparza, and Barb Honchak.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And the other part is that I do think that Justine Kish is kind of overhyped.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even know. She beat Ashley Yoder, but her Nina Ansaroff win was super questionable.
Yeah, I thought Ansaroff beat her, actually.
Yeah, so did I. And so there's this feeling I have where it's like, I've got a fighter who is better, much better than people think. And then on the other hand, I feel like there's a fighter that's not as good as people think. And I have to pick the fighter that's not as good as people think because the style matchup here is just brutal.
Yeah.
And the big thing for me is that I think actually, honestly, more than her own mental state or any of that is a big problem for Felice Herrig. I think the real problem for Felice Herrig is just that she's not very athletic. Like, she looks the part of a great athlete. She looks like she's got all these muscles for days and all this.
Go on.
Fucking
Listen, man, I'm gonna lean in. If Felice Herrig wants to sell herself as a sex symbol, she's an attractive woman. She has every right to do that. Okay. And by the way, it suits her. Okay. It's not like Paige Van Zant awkwardly trying to imply that you should romance your mom for Mother's Day. Okay.
Yeah. No,
and trying to sell you some. Felice Herrig gets it. She plays a sexy woman very well. Let her have it. Yes, Zane. She has muscles for days.
Anyway, the point being, when she actually is in a fight, like, she's a good scrambling grappler and a good wrestler in scrambles. That's actually, like, you know, she's not a great takedown artist, but once she's in on something and working on something and you're in a scramble with her, she's a good practiced technical fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think good athletes just outwork her. They hit harder, they wear her down, they are able to control her and eventually beat her up. You know, I mean, like I say, you look at her losses: Paige Van Zant, Tecia Torres, Carla Esparza, Barb Honchak. They are also the best, toughest athletes she's faced.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Grasso is, you know, she is fast and dynamic, but she's also pretty undertrained and is not she's not a powerful fighter.
No.
She was trying, you know, she was out there to, like, outspeed and out finesse Herrig, which didn't work. And Kish she's a powerhouse that is just going to march you down and wear you out. That's her style, is just to keep on you, to grind you, to be the more powerful fighter, to be the better athlete in the cage. And I think that that's traditionally what tends to beat Felice Herrig, is somebody who can just march in on her, gives her no respect, and can physically outwork her in a way that, you know, somebody like Kylan Curran couldn't, trying to do the same thing.
She can be overwhelmed.
Yep. And so, yeah, I got to pick Kish by decision. I think her power striking game, like, she'll be there to be hit, but Herrig doesn't knock anybody out. So it'll be on Herrig to play a tight technical game and really box with more finesse than she's ever shown before, to keep from getting caught up into this clinch brawl marching forward. So, Herrig and Kish are about even in the odds. Herrig opening at plus 120, dropping to plus 120 or minus 122 where she stayed. Kish opening at minus 160 and going up to minus 102 where she stayed. So Herrig has actually, the odds have flipped to Herrig being a very slight favorite, but
maybe Kish is worth a look. I mean, I think stylistically the fight really does not favor Felice.
No, not unless she can really either hit counters consistently and get out, which her boxing has never looked that finessed. Even against Grasso, she spent a lot of time just kind of either static or marching forward, throwing kind of wild winging shots at Grasso, who didn't want to stand in front of her. Or she has to show a power wrestling game and really drive in on Kish and take her down and make this fight a scrambling grappling match, at which point she absolutely can win that because I think she's a better grappler than Kish. All right. Co-main event, middleweight bout, Tim Boetsch, Johny Hendricks. I'm picking Hendricks. I think the big thing here, honestly, I'd like to say this comes down to some more detailed analysis, but honestly, I think this comes down to chin. Boetsch has still a surprising amount of speed in his hands, and he's got power, but he's also, when it actually comes to throwing shots, he's a very rigid striker. Like, he bounces around and does a lot of that sort of Rashad Evans-esque sort of movement, and then when he's actually throwing, it's just like rigid. Here are my power punches for you. Here is my body. Eat of it, kind of thing. And Hendricks is a lot slicker than that. Hendricks is also not at all chinny in any way still. You know, he doesn't always have the best answers defensively when fighters come after him. He can make mistakes. What at one point seemed like a actually kind of weirdly hyper confident kickboxing game that was like this dual-handed, dual-legged, marching forward kickboxing style has kind of gone away a little as he's tried to become like a slicker fighter, and suddenly his kicking game is much less dynamic. He kind of has to like march into kicks while then being a slick outboxer.
It's kind of interesting though. It's like there was a fight where Gene Fulmer, may he rest in peace, an amazing fighter who described himself as a crude fighter because he was like a Rocky Marciano type. There was a fight of his where he was just this really aggressive, dynamic knockout puncher, and he fought a guy named Spider Webb. Yes, that was his name, and outboxed him over 15 rounds. And it was really weird and janky, but it was really smart as well. And it's kind of fascinating to watch, knowing who Gene Fulmer is. That's kind of the vibe I got from Johny Hendricks' fight with Hector Lombard. Like, he's trying something that maybe isn't natural to him, but something that may actually work quite well at middleweight.
Yeah. Yeah, like he's lighter on his feet. He moves more. He's slipping punches. He's staying out at range. When he has to kick, then he has to like take 2 steps and throw the kick in. But you know, it also shows off how durable he is because Hector Lombard landed shots.
And how durable Hector Lombard still is too, because those stepping counter knees that Hendricks has been working on since the birth of that kickboxing game, they were still there in full effect against Lombard.
Yeah. And I think Boetsch is just too rigid. He doesn't have that unbelievable speed that somebody like Lombard has, where Hendricks is going to be able to just kind of slip around, be crafty from the outside, pick his spots, land with power when he does, and even if Boetsch hits him, he's probably not going to knock him out, and Boetsch has been knocked out several times at this point. So I am picking this to be a weird power kickboxing affair in which the best chin and the slicker defensive fighter takes it, and that's Johny Hendricks.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way. I think Boetsch is possibly a little more dangerous than Lombard was in short moments, because he's I think a little more willing to just come in and let his hands go, charge into the clinch, nail you with a big uppercut, and just flurry. And Lombard's always been he kind of keeps something back no matter what he's doing.
Yep.
But as far as speed and durability and defensive acumen, he's just kind of a worse version of Hector Lombard. So I think that Johny Hendricks, as long as he can take a big shot here and then still, which I think he can, that he will sort of outclass Boetsch down the stretch.
Yeah, I expect him to knock him out at some point. I think if Ed Herman can do it, I don't see why.
Who has the power of Ginger Ed Herman? I mean, I would be with you, but it also has been now 5 years.
True.
Almost. So 5 years since Johny Hendricks knocked somebody out, like 4.5 years. So I'm not sure that he still has it, and I'm not sure that his power really will translate to middleweight the way he could deliver it at welterweight.
Yeah, although to be fair to Johny Hendricks, you know, the fighters he's faced since then, with the exception of Hector Lombard, are all nearly impossible to KO.
That's true. Although to be fair to Tim Boetsch, Johny Hendricks ain't Dan Henderson.
No, but he is Ed Herman. He is Ed Herman.
He is Ed Herman. Yeah, you're right. He is. He kind of is Ed Herman.
Yeah. He's not Dan Henderson, but he can be Ed Herman. He can be Costa Philippou.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah, he can be Philippou. Although he will have to poke Tim Boetsch in the eyes and hit him in the groin a few times to replicate that performance.
There we go. All right. So, but yeah, even if Hendricks doesn't knock him out, I would still pick Hendricks to pick up the decision.
Sure.
Hendricks is the favorite right now, open at -245, adjusted down to -280, and then rising ever since back up to -224. Boetsch opening at +175, adjusted up to +231, and dropping ever since down to +180. Not that sure why those odds are getting closer. I think this is a really good matchup for Hendricks, frankly.
Yeah, I'm okay with where they sit right now, I think. I mean, I know Boetsch is dangerous. It's tough to ever give him really long odds because we've seen what he can do as an underdog and even in a comeback several times. But, you know, Johny Hendricks, the thing I liked the most about Johny Hendricks' win over Lombard was how much fun he had fighting. That's the thing we haven't seen from him in a while. And I think that Johny Hendricks, who feels loose, who's kind of flowing and just feeling the fight, is going to be able to outfeel Tim Boetsch.
Ooh. Hendricks and inside the distance is +225. Hendricks by TKO KO is +320. I don't know.
Now I'm just imagining Tim Boetsch asking Johny Hendricks to feel his face like in Mask. Outfeel me, Johnny. And he just like gives him his face. Johnny's like trying to hide the fact that he's really upset by what he's feeling.
Oh God. That is not an okay image that I need. All right. Time for the main event, if that wasn't already it for y'all. Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Lee. And is this you? I think this might be you.
Yep, it's me. I think Kevin Lee is probably the better fighter, and I think Michael Chiesa will probably beat him. That's basically my read on this fight, is that Kevin Lee, I mean, granted, if Kevin Lee loses here, it's not the end of the road for him. We were probably, if all goes well, still early in his development, because he debuted in 2012. He's not super young as a fighter, but he is super young as a fighter. He's only 24 and has made marked strides in a lot of his fights. I mean, you compare what he did to Francisco Trinaldo even to his fight with Ally Quinta, and it's night and day. Yeah. And the fact that he's been fighting so actively is probably part of that he has just been putting in the work and getting better. Michael Chiesa has kind of, I think, stalled out in terms of getting better. But he's also just way tougher than Kevin Lee, and has one thing he does really, really well, which kind of plays into the weaknesses that Kevin Lee has. Lee is a really solid athlete, not like hugely powerful, but seems strong, especially in takedowns and in the clinch. Moves pretty quickly. He's agile. He can do submission wrestling, anything submission wrestling related, quite well. But there are some lapses from time to time where you're kind of like, oh, what's he doing in this exchange or whatever. On the feet is where the problems really start to arise. Kevin Lee tends to take a lot of pictures. He will throw a pretty looking combination, something he very clearly trained hard on the pads, and then he will sit there admiring his work for half a second and just get nailed on the counter. Or he just kind of seems to lose his head in fights. He has these periods where he's just sort of, maybe it's overthinking, maybe it's underthinking, maybe he's just legitimately losing focus. But there's just these moments that consistently appear where his opponent can do what they want. And Michael Chiesa just does what he wants in any fight, even if the guy isn't letting him. He's extremely durable. He's got this jank, awkward southpaw striking, but really seems to have respectable power in that and surprising accuracy and timing as well. He looks, on heavy hands, we looked at this and we said, Michael Chiesa looks like a guy who does not have a good kickboxing coach, but who does a lot of hard sparring.
And hey, we know that that's true.
Absolutely. We know that we know where he trains, right? Not great technical advice, but a lot of wars in the gym. Yeah. And while, people complain that, and for good reason, there are problems with that. You don't want to have that be the only way you train. And I suspect it's probably a large part of how Chiesa trains. It is also true that hard sparring imbues you with certain abilities that people who don't spar hard often don't have. You are going to be very comfortable in exchanges. You're not going to freak out when you get hit hard. Even if you're staggered, you have known in hard sparring what it's like to get stunned and regain your balance and fight back. Hard sparring is like testing ground for an actual fight. And Michael Chiesa is a very good fighter. And Kevin Lee is a very good athlete, but maybe not yet quite as good a fighter as Michael Chiesa. When it comes down to a scrap, I think Chiesa is more comfortable. And so I think what's going to happen is he'll probably clip Lee with something on the feet in some really ugly exchange, maybe something in the clinch where Chiesa is not a bad wrestler and has some nice strikes as well. And then ultimately, it's Michael Chiesa, so if he's going to win, you got to pick him by rear naked choke. Some point, he's going to jump on Kevin Lee's back, take his neck, and get the win.
Yeah, if Kevin Lee can just be slick and on his toes and play a basic striking game, the opportunities to beat Michael Chiesa are endless doing that. Benil Dariush was just tooling Michael Chiesa for large portions of that fight behind some, if I go in and land a big overhand and then get back out, I will have, I can do that all day. And then he was like, maybe I'll wrestle this dude. And, a minute later he was tapping. So,
yeah.
But yeah, Kevin Lee, I think a lot of it is it's confidence and swagger. And it's that, Kevin Lee really believes that he's not going to get hurt in exchanges. He really believes that nothing's going to come back and get him and that he doesn't have to pay attention to what his opponent is doing. And then there's somebody there fighting him, it's great to have confidence, but you actually do have to have checks on that, especially defensively. You have to have good defense to go with your confidence. And Kevin Lee's defense has always been wooden. His delivery, his striking delivery has always been wooden.
Yeah. And the big thing is, if you don't have that, you also need a chin. Yeah. And unfortunately, Chiesa is able to get away with the woodenness of his striking more easily than Lee just because he's more durable.
Yeah. Because Lee, part of why I picked Trinaldo to beat him was just over how wooden Kevin Lee's striking is. And Trinaldo was turning the tide in that fight before getting clipped with a head kick.
Yeah.
It was the messier it became, the more Trinaldo landed.
Yes.
And the other part of that is too that as things got messy, Lee just kind of he wore down a bit in a way that Like, coming out really slick and looking really good, and then he gets hit a few times, things get a little difficult, and I think he has a bit of an adrenaline dump, or, he's got a pretty muscular frame. He gets tired over time a little.
Yeah, and maybe that confidence is kind of false. Maybe it's a bit of a
Yeah.
veneer where Lee puts on a big show and is really flashy because he's maybe got a little insecurity. So when he gets touched, that comes out. We see he falls apart pretty quickly for someone who is supposedly so confident.
Yeah, and he fights hard even when that's happening. Like, he stays on it. It's not like he falls apart and then just is, like, gone from a fight. He fights hard through it, but it means that there are more openings and there are more opportunities for him to get hit. There are more places for him to get attacked.
Well, I think that right there is the core reason in the personality that causes a lot of brawlers to be brawlers, is that they get hit and go crazy trying to fight back. It's not that they don't fight back, it's that they just kind of stop thinking about how they're fighting back.
Yeah. And Chiesa is just too dangerous. He's too tough. He's too dangerous to give those opportunities to. And he's proven me wrong too many times, picking against him, being like, man, this janky ass striking is just going to fail him and he's going to get lit up and that's it. But it doesn't, His fight with Joe Lozon, he would have won that fight had it kept going, very likely. He got choked out by Jorge Masvidal, but he also shocked Masvidal early in that fight and almost won it.
Yeah, he knocked him down really with a hard left hand early in that fight.
And otherwise, he's won. That's it. Like, Lee just does not show me that consistency round to round as a fight goes on that makes me believe that he'll beat Kevin Lee, or that he'll beat Michael Chiesa. Now, on the same token, like I say, if Lee just comes out looking to box, staying safe, and keeping his defense in check, opportunities to outbox Michael Chiesa there are so many.
Yeah.
His striking is not good at all.
Yeah, maybe if he even goes out there and relies heavily on like a low kicking game, just sort of kicks at his calves and just stays far away.
Yeah, throw the occasional big overhand to just plunk him, because Chiesa is the kind of guy who will like throw both hands at once and just kind of run at you.
Yeah.
It's not pretty. It's not functional 90% of the time.
It occurs to me that it's weird that we're talking this way about Chiesa. We'll look at his 2 losses in the UFC and be like, but otherwise he's won. Kevin Lee's UFC career has been very similar. He's only had 2 losses. He's only lost to Leonardo Santos and Al Iaquinta.
Yep.
Both of those can be written off somewhat by circumstances, but there's just something about the way he's inconsistent in his victories that gives you more doubts about him than Chiesa. Like, Chiesa's inconsistent in that you can clearly see he's not always winning, but he is always trying equally hard to get to a point where he's winning. Yeah. It never seems to phase him. And little things always seem to phase Lee, even when he's looking good and winning fights.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just something about him. I'm not sure what it is, but I hope he can sort it out soon. And unfortunately, even if he does lose, as we both think he will, again, he has a lot of time to continue getting better.
It's also partially to that that other than that doctor stoppage, Michael Chiesa has never been stopped.
Yeah. Oh, he's teak tough.
Yeah. So Kevin Lee has, and that it's hard not to it's hard not to see that and to think about it. So yeah, I'm picking Chiesa, and the odds on this fight, Chiesa is a slight underdog right now, opening at -120, jumping up to +107, and dropping down to +100, riding the line of ±100, and now jumping up at the last minute here to +108. So some last minute money coming in on Kevin Lee, I would say. Yeah. Lee adjusting early from opening at -120, adjusting to -125. He stayed just about there until late, where he's dropped down to -134 at the last minute. So
yeah, I'm not going to touch this one as far as betting is concerned.
No.
Tough fight to call.
Tough fight to call. I'm calling it for Chiesa, but I expect Chiesa to get... I expect him to get beat on for the first round of this fight.
Sure.
Honestly.
Yeah, I expect him to get beat on at points throughout the fight.
Yeah. So
Lee is definitely the guy with more upside, more potential to become a complete contender type of fighter. But Chiesa, man, something about him. He's just got a fighter's instinct or something about him. He just does not back down, doesn't shy away.
He's got such a funky ass wrestle grappling game that people can't train for because it's.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of that Maya thing going on too. Like he's legitimately a very tricky takedown artist, and on the ground, he's obviously a wizard. So, yeah, it's tough.
All right. Well, on that note, we got to get out of here. You can find me on Twitter at TheseAintSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com, where in our various roles, capacities, whatever you want to call it, give us a like. That's a thumbs up over on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's MMANation.com, DOTCOM. We will be back next week for the Ultimate Fighter. No, we will be off next week, which means we will be back for the MMA Depressed Us.
That's right.
And so you all have that to look forward to. And we'll have all our other regular shows, Heavy Hands, If I Did It, all that good stuff. So thanks for tuning in.
The Ultimate Fighter card after that is legit, by the way. It should be extremely fun. So things to look forward to.
Indeed. All right. On that note, thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.